fired for being too old. So he built a $1 billion startup. The conference room felt colder than usual that Tuesday morning. Robert Chen sat across from HR Director Jennifer Martinez and his manager of 12 years, Steve Thompson. At 57, Robert had weathered many corporate storms, but something about Jennifer's practiced smile and Steve's inability to meet his eyes told him this wouldn't be another routine meeting. Robert, we want to start by thanking you for your years of service to TechVision Corp. Jennifer began, her voice carrying that peculiar HR tone, simultaneously warm and detached. You've been an invaluable asset to our engineering team. The past tense didn't escape Robert's notice. He'd been writing code since the days of punch cards had patents to his name, and had mentored half the current engineering department. Yet here he was watching Jennifer slide a folder across the polished mahogany table. Due to restructuring and the need to align our workforce with evolving market dynamics, she continued, we're eliminating several positions, including yours. Robert's throat tightened. Restructuring my team just delivered the cloud migration project 2 months ahead of schedule. Steve finally looked up. It's not about performance, Rob. The company needs fresh perspectives, new energy. We're bringing in talent that understands modern development paradigms. Modern development paradigms. Robert almost laughed. I implemented our entire microservices architecture. I introduced Docker to this company. What exactly don't I understand? Jennifer's smile never wavered. This isn't a reflection on your capabilities. We're offering a generous severance package, 6 months, salary, extended health benefits, and of course, strong references. As Robert walked out of TechVision's gleaming headquarters for the last time, cardboard box in hand, he overheard 2 junior developers in the lobby. Did you hear they're bringing in that hotshot from Silicon Valley to run engineering? Guy's like 28. Finally, the other replied. About time we got someone who gets how things work now. Robert stood in the parking lot, staring at the building where he'd spent the last 12 years. The California sun beat down mercilessly, but he felt cold. At 57, he was apparently a relic, a fossil, in an industry that worshipped youth like a deity. The next 3 months were a blur of rejection. Despite his impressive resume, MIT graduate, 25 years of experience, numerous patents, the response was always the same. Sometimes they were honest, cultural fit concerns. Other times they hid behind euphemisms, overqualified, seeking someone with growth potential, or Robert's personal favorite, looking for candidates who can commit long-term. One particularly brutal interview at a startup called NextGen ended with the 20-something CEO actually saying, I'm just not sure you'd vibe with our culture. We work hard and play hard here. Lots of late nights, energy drinks, that sort of thing. I've pulled more all-nighters than you've had birthdays, Robert wanted to say. Instead, he smiled politely and thanked them for their time. It was after that interview, sitting in his Honda Civic in yet another startup's parking lot, that Robert had his epiphany. He thought about all the brilliant engineers he knew who'd been pushed out, sidelined, or ignored once they hit their 40s or 50s. These were people who'd built the internet, who'd solved problems these digital natives couldn't even conceptualize. Yet they were being discarded like outdated hardware. That night, Robert called his former colleague, Dr. Sarah Kim, a brilliant data scientist who'd been packaged out of her job at 52. Sarah, how many experienced tech professionals do you think are unemployed or underemployed because of age discrimination? Thousands, she replied without hesitation. Maybe tens of thousands. Why, what if we didn't need them anymore? What do you mean? Now, what if we built something ourselves? What if we created a company that actually valued experience? The idea that would become Silver Code Solutions was born in Robert's garage, just like so many Silicon Valley legends. But unlike those stories of 20-something dropouts, this one started with 5 tech veterans, whose combined experience totaled over 150 years. Sarah brought in Marcus Thompson, a 55-year-old infrastructure architect who'd been laid off from Oracle. Marcus recruited Elena Volkov, 61 of the pioneers in cybersecurity, who'd been told she was no longer aligned with company direction. The 5th founder was James Wright, 48, a full-stack developer who'd been passed over for promotion 5 times, in favor of younger, rising stars. Their first meeting was in Robert's living room, laptops balanced on TV trays, coffee brewing constantly. Here's what I'm thinking. Robert began pulling up a presentation. There are thousands of companies struggling with legacy systems. They need people who actually understand COBOL, who know why their 30-year-old infrastructure works the way it does. The kids coming out of boot camps don't even know these languages exist. It's bigger than legacy systems, Elena interjected. It's institutional knowledge. When companies fire their experienced staff, they lose decades of understanding about why decisions were made, how systems interconnect, where the bodies are buried. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. We could offer consulting services, but also transition planning, documentation, knowledge transfer. And here's the kicker: we staff it entirely with experienced professionals. Make our age our selling point, not something to hide. The energy in the room was palpable. For the first time in months, these discarded tech veterans felt hope. They bootstrapped Silvercode with their severance packages and retirement savings. Robert converted his garage into an office. They worked 18-hour days, not because some VC was breathing down their necks, but because they had something to prove. Their first client came through Marcus's network, a regional bank running on a COBOL-based system that younger consultants had quoted 2 years and $10 million to replace. Silvercode's team came in, optimized the existing system, built modern APIs to interface with it, and had them running smoothly in 6 months for a fraction of the cost. How'd the bank's CTO? Asked, amazed. Robert smiled. Because we've seen this before. We know COBOL. We understand that sometimes the best solution isn't to tear everything down and start over. Word spread. The insurance company came calling, then a government agency, then a Fortune 500 manufacturer. Each time Silvercode delivered where younger, hipper consultancies had failed or overpromised. 6 months in, they had a problem. Every startup dreams of too much business. We need to hire, Sarah announced at their morning meeting. I've got 12 contracts sitting on my desk, and we can't handle them all. So let's hire, Robert said, but let's do it our way. Silvercode's job postings were revolutionary in Silicon Valley. Senior developer wanted minimum 20 years experience required. Gray hair a plus. We value wisdom over energy drinks. Knowledge of legacy systems essential. Ability to mentor younger developers highly desired. No ping-pong tables, but excellent healthcare and work-life balance. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of experienced tech professionals, many of whom had given up on finding meaningful work, applied. Robert personally read every resume, seeing in each one a story like his own talented people discarded by an industry obsessed with youth. They hired carefully, bringing on not just technical talent, but building a culture that valued experience, mentorship, and sustainable practices. No one at Silvercode was expected to sleep under their desk or live on Red Bull. They worked hard, but they also went home to their families, pursued hobbies, and lived actual lives. Year 2 brought venture capital interest, but with a twist. The VC firm that approached them wasn't run by 20-somethings in hoodies, but by veteran investors who saw the market gap Silvercode was filling. Every company eventually becomes a legacy company, said Patricia Chen, no relation, the lead partner. The smart ones realize they need people who understand both where they've been and where they're going. You're not just a consulting firm. You're building a new model for tech employment. With $50 million in Series A, funding Silvercode expanded beyond consulting. They launched an academy where experienced professionals taught both technical skills and the soft skills that only come with experience: how to manage stakeholder expectations, how to architect systems that last decades, how to navigate corporate politics. They created a placement service matching experienced professionals with companies smart enough to value their expertise. They even started acquiring and modernizing legacy software companies, staffed by people who understood the technology. The pushback from traditional Silicon Valley was immediate and fierce. Tech blogs ran hit pieces: Why Silvercode's aging workforce can't keep up, and The Danger of Nostalgia-Driven Development. A prominent young CEO tweeted, "If you're hiring people who remember dial-up, you're building for the past, not the future." Robert's response went viral. "We remember dial-up because we built the infrastructure that replaced it. We don't code for nostalgia. We code for the reality that today's cutting edge is tomorrow's legacy system. Plan accordingly." The market vindicated Silvercode's approach. Year 3 saw $300 million in revenue. Year 4, they went international, opening offices in London, Tokyo, and Bangalore, all staffed by experienced professionals who'd been sidelined in their local markets. The real validation came when TechVision Corp., the company that had fired Robert, hired Silvercode to rescue a failed digital transformation project. The young hotshot they'd hired to replace Robert had attempted to rebuild everything from scratch, burning through $50 million in 3 years with nothing to show for it. Robert personally led the rescue team. Walking back into TechVision's headquarters, He felt no triumph, only a professional determination to solve the problem. Steve Thompson, his former manager, looked uncomfortable in the kickoff meeting. Robert, I want to apologize, Steve said afterward. Letting you go was the biggest mistake I've made as a manager. You did me a favor, Robert replied honestly. If you hadn't fired me, Silvercode wouldn't exist. Thousands of experienced professionals wouldn't have meaningful work. And you'd still be struggling with this transformation. The TechVision project became a case study in Silvercode's approach. Instead of starting over, they carefully analyzed the existing systems preserved, what worked, modernized what didn't, and completed the transformation in 18 months under budget and exceeding specifications. By year 5, Silvercode wasn't just a billion-dollar company. It had sparked a movement. Other firms began reconsidering their youth-obsessed hiring practices. Studies showed that age-diverse teams outperformed homogeneous ones. The term gray-haired developer went from pejorative to badge of honor. Robert, now 62, stood before Congress, testifying about age discrimination in tech. We tell our children that education and experience matter, he said. Then we tell our workers that after 40, they're obsolete. This isn't just morally wrong. It's economically stupid. We're wasting decades of accumulated knowledge because of arbitrary bias. Silvercode's impact extended beyond business metrics. They funded research into age discrimination, created scholarships for older workers returning to school, and launched a nonprofit providing free tech training for workers over 50. The company's culture became legendary. They had Wisdom Wednesdays, where senior staff shared war stories and hard-won lessons. They paired every new graduate hire with a mentor who had at least 20 years of experience. They proved that you could build a successful tech company without ageism, crunch culture, or treating employees as disposable. Elena, now Silvercode's CTO, implemented policies that seemed radical in Silicon Valley but were common sense everywhere else. Flexible schedules for those caring for aging parents. Comprehensive health coverage that actually covered the conditions people over 50 face. Sabbaticals for long-term employees. The ability to transition to part-time work without losing benefits. And we're not running a charity, she explained to skeptics. We're recognizing that experienced workers have different needs and contributions. When you accommodate those, you get loyalty, institutional knowledge, and perspectives that make your company stronger. The ultimate irony came when young developers started actively seeking positions at Silvercode, drawn by the mentorship opportunities and sustainable culture. I can learn more in a year here than 5 years at a typical startup, one 25-year-old engineer told a tech reporter. My mentor has forgotten more about distributed systems than most people ever learn. Robert's story inspired others. Dr. Lisa Chang, laid off at 55 from a pharmaceutical company, founded BioWisdom, applying Silvercode's model to biotech. Thomas Mitchell, a 59-year-old financial analyst, told he was too senior for his role, created Finance Forward, specializing in complex regulatory compliance that required deep experience. The movement even had a name, the Silver Revolution. Books were written, documentaries filmed, business school cases studied. But for Robert, the individual stories mattered most. He kept a file of letters from people whose lives had been changed. The 60-year-old developer who thought his career was over until Silvercode hired him. The 55-year-old project manager who used Silvercode's academy to transition into technical leadership. The 48-year-old woman who left a toxic startup environment for Silvercode's sustainable culture. Every letter reminds me why we started this, Robert told Sarah during one of their regular coffee meetings. They still met in his kitchen even though Silvercode now occupied 3 buildings in Palo Alto. Remember when we thought we'd be happy with 10 clients and breaking even? Sarah laughed. I remember thinking I was finished, Robert admitted. That my career was over because some executive decided I was too old. Now look at us. Silvercode went public in year 7 with a valuation of $8.2 billion. The IPO was unique. They reserved a significant portion of shares for employees over 50 who'd been laid off from tech jobs. The offering was oversubscribed by 300%. In his speech at the New York Stock Exchange, Robert didn't talk about market penetration or growth trajectories. He talked about second chances, about the value of experience, about building companies that see employees as assets to be developed, not resources to be consumed. Silvercode proves that success in tech doesn't require discrimination, he said. It doesn't require sacrificing your health, your family, or your sanity. It requires recognizing that innovation comes from all ages, that experience has value, and that the best companies are built by diverse teams who respect each other. The financial media love to focus on the numbers, the billion-dollar valuation, the 40% year-over-year growth, the expansion into new markets. But for Robert and his co-founders, success was measured differently. It was Marcus, now president of global operations, hiring his former Oracle colleague, who'd been unemployed for 2 years. It was Elena's cybersecurity division preventing a major breach at a hospital because her team understood vulnerabilities that younger analysts had missed. It was James's development teams maintaining perfect deployment records because they'd learned from decades of mistakes. Most personally for Robert, it was the day TechVision's board fired the CEO, who'd championed fresh perspectives over experience. The company had lost half its value, suffered multiple failed projects, and hemorrhaged institutional knowledge. They offered Robert the CEO position, a delicious irony he politely declined. "I've got a company to run," he told them, "but I can recommend several excellent executives from our placement service. All over 50, all brilliant, all ready to help you rebuild." As Silvercoat entered its 10th year, Robert reflected on the journey from that cold conference room to building one of tech's most influential companies. He hadn't set out to build a billion-dollar startup. He'd set out to prove that experience had value, that age discrimination was both wrong and bad business, that there was a better way to build and run tech companies. And what's next when a reporter asked him at Silvercoat's 10th anniversary celebration? Robert, now 67, smiled. The same thing as always. Solving problems, building great technology, and proving that the best code doesn't have an expiration date. Neither do the people who write it. He looked out at the celebration, hundreds of employees, partners, and clients, spanning generations working together. The young learning from the experienced energized by the young. It was the antithesis of the culture that had rejected him, and it was thriving. "You know what the real irony is?" Robert told the reporter. "They fired me for being too old. But building this company, fighting this fight, tackling these challenges, it's made me feel younger than I have in years." As the party continued around him, Robert thought about all the people still facing age discrimination, still being told they were too old, too experienced, too expensive. Silvercoat had made a dent, but there was so much more work to do. The revolution isn't over," he murmured to himself, already thinking about the next challenge, the next barrier to break, the next way to prove that in technology as in wine, age could be an asset, not a liability. The boy genius startup founders would always get the magazine covers and the breathless profiles. But Robert Chen and Silvercoat had proven something more important, that success in tech wasn't about being young. It was about being good. An experience, it turned out, was one hell of a competitive advantage. As he walked back into the party, surrounded by colleagues who'd been told they were too old, too slow, too outdated, Robert couldn't help but smile. They'd shown them all, and they were just getting started. The billion-dollar valuation was nice. The vindication was better. But the best part, knowing that thousands of experienced professionals were back doing what they loved, valued for their knowledge, building the future with the wisdom of the past. That conference room at TechVision had felt like an ending. It turned out to be the beginning of something much bigger than any of them had imagined. And at 67, Robert Chen was proof that sometimes the best chapters of your story come when others think the book should be closed. In Silicon Valley, where 25 was considered over the hill, Silvercoat stood as a monument to a simple truth: wisdom, experience, and determination don't have an expiration date. And sometimes being fired for being too old is exactly the push you need to build something timeless.